Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and triangles of all ages, back to another triangle strategy video. So these videos have been popping off on the channel, and I have been, one, extremely proud of them, two, floored by the support that they have been given, and just I've been enjoying so much talking to you guys in the comments, seeing your thoughts, just what everyone's different experiences about the game has been. In the first 10 days. It's really not been out that long, and at this point I'm finished with everything. Thank you. Honestly, it's been a great 10 days for me, a great past month for the channel. I can't even talk. So yeah, back with another video, and you guys have probably guessed by now with my rambling in the first 30 seconds and just looking at the screen, and probably the title of the video and the clickbaity thumbnail, but this is going to be a route guide. And I'm going to talk about every single route, every single split path decision, sort of how it impacts minor details moving forward, just a bunch of the knowledge that I've learned by playing this game. Now, warning, as I usually warn at the beginning of my videos, this is going to have spoilers. There's no way for me to talk about all these mini decisions without spoilers. I will try my best not to spoil specific endings with early chapters, but I'm telling you right now, spoiler warning, okay? So I'm mostly going to be focused on split things. I'm not going to be focused on like chapters 1 and 2 in particular. They're like the same chapter, right? They don't change and they don't really mean anything. But we're going to start off with something like a chapter 3. And in chapter 3, the first decision we have to make is we have our guests, both Hyzant and Esfrost, have come to Glenbrook to visit in the preparation for Serenoa and Frederica's wedding, and we have to choose to escort one of them back home. Which one we choose does not matter at this point in time, because as you can see, the paths will reconverge. And in most situations where you have to choose one of 2, one of 3, one of 4, the paths will reconverge in some way, shape, or form. But this early decision does matter because it has a different recruitable character on each side of the path. As you can see, the moral decision here is to go to Esfrost, surprisingly. I guess to see the in-laws, that's the moral decision to do, and if you choose this path, you will be able to recruit Rudolph, who is an archer, who is very, very, very strong and hits very, very, very hard at the cost of having range, or lack of range, I should say. If you go to Hyzant, on the other hand, you will be able to recruit Corentin, who is an ice mage who can build ice walls, give your units ice shields, and attack with ice magic that causes silence. So that's the main difference here. Do you want a mage, or do you want an offensive-based, trap-based utility archer? That's your choice, but the decision here doesn't really matter, and you will be replaying this game anyways to get the different endings and all that kind of stuff, so you're going to get the other one at some point anyways. So if you want a nice, cold, wintry, big castle to explore, you can do that. If you want a desert town to explore, you can do that. So there you go, that's the chapter 3 split. After that, we go back into 4, 5, 6, and these are also all the same. In chapter 4, you go to the mines and you meet Dragan, and we won't talk about what happens to Dragan because it pains my little weak heart. Well, actually, I don't really have one because I'm evil, but you get what I'm trying to say. I was not happy with what happened to Dragan. I was really hoping we could save him based on the decision we made in 3. Oh well. In 5, the castle is attacked and we sneak in, and this is the arrive map where you need to get Roland to the other side of the map, which is hilarious in New Game Plus, by the way. You can basically do this in quote-unquote 1 turn without attacking any enemies, without killing anyone. Very funny. And then chapter 6 is you're running away from the castle and you're trying to get off. This is the bridge map that we saw in the first demo, and this one's fairly straightforward. Maxwell's an ally unit on the map, and then we all know what happens at the end of this map with the big fight between Maxwell and Avlora. After that, we reach chapter 7, and this is the very first decision that really, really matters, because chapter 7 looks like it has 2 decisions. It actually has 3 of them, and I'll explain this in a second. In chapter 7, you get to choose between giving up Roland or protecting Roland. Now, the moral option at the top, as you can see, is refusing to surrender Roland and defend him, and this gets you a map in Wolfort Castle where you are attacked by Avlora and a lot of Esfrost soldiers. This is a hard map. Or, if you give up Roland, you instead have to go down to the Fox domain and fight against Landroy, who, in my opinion, is also really, really strong as a very long-range archer who does a lot of damage, and he can also just come down those little pulleys at the top to come and hit you from uphill, and you're kind of fighting an uphill battle. Both maps are fairly difficult. However, which one you choose initially doesn't matter on the outcome of your branching paths. It'll take you down a little bit of a different path here. You see you're forced down a couple different branches of 8, and then you won't reconvene until Chapter 9. But the top choice here is a little bit more than it seems, because refusing to surrender Roland gives you a branch that you might not be aware exists. In this chapter, you can either choose to use the fire traps in Wolfort Castle, or not use the fire traps in Wolfort Castle to fight Avlora. If you use the fire traps in Wolfort Castle, you are immediately disqualifying yourself from something later on. A lot of you probably already know what this is, but as long as you do this chapter, Chapter 7, without using the fire traps, or you can actually choose to go and fight Landroy, none of these choices actually matter, you won't disqualify yourself. But if you use the fire traps, you immediately disqualify yourself from said path down the line. So that's the Chapter 7 split. Based on that, you go into 2 different forms of Chapter 8. Now, Chapter 8 is the one where if you save Roland, you are then approached by House Tellior. Now, Tellior is a snake. I think anyone who sees him, who looks at a portrait of him, who hears him talk and what he says will immediately tell you this guy is a snake. And he is inviting you to ally with him, or he proposes help to help Roland. Where, in reality, Tellior is actually cooperating with Gustadolf. So you can either choose to accept Tellior's aid, which is the moral option here, or refuse Tellior's aid, which is the freedom option. If you accept Tellior's aid, you actually get invited to go to House Tellior, which is a really nice, pretty map. The Tellior area is like reminiscent of a vineyard. I think they're famous for wine, so there's a lot of water, and there's a dam with a little waterfall coming down. It's a really, really, really nice map to explore and look at. So you can go there, and he obviously backstabs you and tries to get everyone drunk and ambushes you at night. And this map has a bunch of different houses in it. It has Rufus as the boss. This is the first instance where you might encounter Rufus in the game. So it has Rufus as a boss, and your army is split up into groups of 2 or 3 across the map, with Rufus kind of in the middle and a bunch of enemies coming around from all over the place. So that's the Tellior accepting map. The other one is, in my opinion, the more difficult one, or at least I felt that I had more difficulty with it, is refusing the Tellior offer. And this one, Tellior comes with Rufus, so Rufus is still the boss, to attack House Wolfort on behalf of Esfrost. So this second one is a defeat boss map where Rufus will rush up to you with a bunch of enemies, and they can kind of come up a winding middle area, or the right-hand side where they walk straight up the hill, or the left-hand side where they walk on the other side of another hill. I wish I had footage of all this. I might actually have footage of this specific chapter that I'll put in the back, but I'm sorry for the lack of gameplay visuals. I just did not record every single map in the game. So that's the side of 8 if you helped Roland. If you did not help Roland, you instead are going to be told about Sorcely offering aid instead of Tellior. And so what you can do is you can either... I think you accept Sorcely's aid no matter what, but you can choose to either ally with Esfrost against Sorcely, or ally with Sorcely to betray... No, what you do is you tell Esfrost that you need help because Hyzant is coming. And you can either betray Esfrost, or you can side with Esfrost to repel them. So this map change, it's the same map. Unlike Chapter 8 where it's 2 different maps, this is the same map. On the utility section, you ally with Esfrost, and they help you, and you have Avlora as your ally in this map. So not only have you skipped one Avlora fight in Chapter 7, but you also have her as your ally in Chapter 8. And the enemy commander is Booker, who is Sorcely's understudy or commander or whatever of his forces. And it's like a little map with a boat and, 2 sides of the boat, and you're kind of in the top left corner with Avlora just near your units. So that's the map for this one, and it just kind of changes who your ally is in the second version, where Booker and a couple of his people are your allies, and Avlora is your enemy. So you can either fight Avlora or Booker as the boss. This decision does not matter. Well, it does in terms of what convictions you get and stuff like that, but that's kind of the split decision. After that, the two paths go straight back into Chapter 9. And Chapter 9 doesn't waste any time. It's not a unique chapter. It immediately throws you right back into a split. This split matters because in Chapter 9, the paths that you can choose are revolving around Sorceley's illicit salt trade. So you hear about an illegal trade that Sorceley is asking you to do. He's asking you to carry salt from Hyzant and take it all the way to Esfrost. You have two choices here. You have the utility choice at the top, which is to accept and help Sorceley in his illicit salt trade, or you have the choice at the bottom, which is to expose Sorceley's salt trade. The source at the top takes you back to Esfrost as you try and go to deliver the salt. And here you arrive in Esfrost and you're basically ambushed by Sicris, who is one of the Esfrost commanders, as well near Twinsgate, which is where Svarog is, or Frederica's uncle. And this choice matters. If you want that route that I'm going to talk about in a little bit at the end, you need to go to help the illicit salt trade. And the chapter itself doesn't matter, it's what the chapter leads into, which is Chapter 10. In Chapter 10, Svarog takes the salt from you, and he basically tells you to get out of here, or something like that, along those lines. And what you can do is you request aid from Svarog, and to convince him, you have two choices. You either reveal Roland's identity to him, because before Chapter 9 they had announced that Roland was dead, and Benedict did a very good job of faking Roland's death. So in this chapter with Svarog, you can choose to tell him about Roland's death, which is this option, the Liberty option. And this is the one that matters for the true ending, or whatever it is, to unlock it. So that's why you need to agree to Sorceley's illicit salt trade, but not because you want to help Sorceley, it's because you want to reveal Roland's identity to Svarog, and as it says in the chapter description here, you find a common enemy with him, and he promises to help you strike down Gustadolf in the future. And then Svarog lets you go back. If you don't tell him, I actually forget what this chapter is. This is where Svarog is an ally. Maybe Sicris is the boss in this one. And this chapter is the bandits, I think. I think I made a mistake. I don't remember. Anyways, you guys get the gist of it. Chapter 10 is the one with a source that ambushes you. No, this is the mercenary. No, I was right. 9 is Sicris. 10 is the mercenary. I'm getting so confused as to who the bosses are. I should have a clearer vision of this. But it is what it is. Anyways, the point is that we're talking about sort of how the splits matter. And this split is one that matters heavily because you want to expose Roland's identity to Svarog. If you do, you go up against a spy. Definitely, that's what I remember, is you go up against one of Gustadolf's spies, and Svarog is like on the other side of the map with you, and there's a little valley in the middle between two high mountains. This was a fun map because I had Jens, and he was just kind of flinging people off cliffs. It was hilarious. And, okay, I'm remembering this now. And if you don't agree with Svarog, or you don't reveal Roland's identity to Svarog, you instead are desperate. He doesn't pay you for the salt, which I thought was really funny. And you end up going to Claris from the consortium to ask for money to help pay back to Sorceley the money that you would have owed for the salt trade. And you end up in an arena, an underground arena, to fight for reward money. And the boss here is Rufus. So you could have already fought Rufus in Chapter 8, and then he's back in Chapter 10. And there's actually another instance where you fight Rufus again. So I was just laughing because this guy does not die. He's just alive perpetually. He does not go down. But anyways, after you do that, you go to Chapter 11, which you can see is another split. But I want to talk about the other side of Chapter 9, which is if you decide to report Sorceley. You instead go on sort of a spy mission to figure out his route of the illicit salt trade and expose him. And instead, Booker ambushes you in this chapter. And it's actually a really nasty chapter. You kind of start out low in a valley, and on both sides of you are like high hills with some archers on them. And then he's got some really annoying ninjas or whatever they are, the Byzantian swordsmen, who are very quick and hit very hard. And he also comes down and he's got act twice. So he can like move and then move again and attack. So this map was pretty brutal for me the first time I was playing it on sort of a normal new game run. This was one of the maps that I went down. And that's Booker, and then I think Benedict kills him at the end of the chapter. And then you get to chapter 10. Now, if you'll notice, all of the branches until now have had splits that are color-coded based on liberty, morality, or utility, and chapter 10 doesn't. And that's because chapter 10 does something really interesting, and it's the first instance that it's done. I believe it happens 1 or 2 more times down the road. But chapter 10 is like an Ace Attorney reference, and you basically go to Hyzant City, the map we've already seen from chapter 3, and if you haven't been there before, well, this is your chance to go. And what you need to do is you kind of need to sniff around and look for evidence of Sorceley's illegal salt trade. And if you find all of it, it's one of those exploration sessions where it won't tell you you've found all the evidence. You kind of just need to go off your gut feeling whether or not you've been thorough enough. And then you end the exploration by hitting start and you go out of it. And after it, you go back to your camp and Benedict starts asking you or asks you 3 questions. Depending on whether you answer those 3 questions correctly, Benedict will either say, okay, we have enough evidence to expose Sorceley, or we don't have enough evidence to expose Sorceley. And that's the 2 splits that you see here. You don't get to make this decision. This decision gets made for you, depending on your investigation and the results that you made, or the results that you came out with. So, if you do have enough evidence, you end up going to Sorceley's encampment, and that map was also brutal because I think Serenoa and Benedict start in one place, and then the rest of your team is kind of on the other side of the map, and you're also sort of ambushed from all sides from Sorceley's guards. It was a fun map, but it was hard, and yeah, basically you need to beat all the enemies there and find his ledger, and then you go back with that, and Sorceley gets punished because he basically got exposed. The other side of it, where you don't have enough evidence, you get summoned before the Saintly Seven, and you basically talk to them and say, here's the evidence that I have, blah, blah, blah. And I don't think the trial matters at all, or any of the outcomes of the trials. You basically go through, I think, a series of questioning from 5 different members of the Saintly Seven, and they ask you questions and you get to respond based on the evidence you have. Either way, basically they say, okay, it's trial by combat, it's you against Sorceley. And you go back to that same arena map that you would have gone to in Chapter 10, happens in this one, and you fight Sorceley and a couple other of his units. It's honestly a pretty simple map. You can push enemies off the thing into like traps at the bottom, and they can also push you off, so it's kind of funny. But yeah, you're fighting Sorceley directly here, and then you can just kill him in trial by combat. And at the end of this, you replace him as one of the Saintly Seven, which to me was actually a pretty interesting twist. I did not expect to become one of the Saintly Seven. Unfortunately, it's not route specific. It happens for everyone, which was a little bit of a bummer. I would have liked a choice between becoming a Saintly Seven member or not. But because you're one of the Saintly Seven, the first order of duty that they ask of you is that since there are Roselle living in the Wolfort domain, you need to give those up and return them to Hyzant. And here is where you make another route-defining choice. And this one is actually defining in more than one way, and we'll talk about it when we get to it, but this choice makes another character split between whether or not you get one of 2 different characters, depending on the route you go down later. To make it less complicated, I'll talk about it when it's visually obvious. But so here you have a decision. You can either tell the Roselle to get back to the source and go work their butts off, or you can say, absolutely not, I don't want the Roselle to go work, and I'm going to help them. And based on that, you get Chapter 11. The utility option of Chapter 11 is the one where you tell the Roselle or you try to convince them that they should go back to Hyzant. If you go down this route, you will be able to have 2 battle maps. Chapter 11, which is the one where you fight against the Roselle and Jerome is the boss, and this one is fighting uphill where they're sort of positioned at the top of their houses and shooting down at you. And after that happens, you try and reason with Jerome, and you kind of do eventually manage to convince him. But in Chapter 12, frickin' Telior comes in with Rufus again, so this could be the 3rd instance where you fight frickin' Rufus. And you have to fight 2 bosses at the same time, Telior and Rufus has this really annoying rock throw move where he just slings a rock at an all the way up to the top of a building, and it really hurts very hard, and he can do it without a TP cost, which I think is stupid. But, it is what it is. There you go. So 2 battles if you choose to not save the Roselle or not side with the Roselle. If you do side with the Roselle, and this is the choice that you need to make to unlock the other ending at the end, you only get 1 battle, and this is defending the Roselle from Rufus and Tellier. So it's basically the same as Chapter 12's battle here, you skip Chapter 11's, which is fighting the Roselle. So you only have 1 battle. Speedrunners, there you go, that's your route. If you want to skip an entire chapter, protect the Roselle. Chapter 12 ends up being more of a story exploration chapter where you have to explore the area around the Roselle, and it's actually really funny. This is one and only instance in the game where if you don't explore thoroughly enough and you don't find the salt crystal, it's a game over. So you basically have to find the salt crystal in this chapter. And there's no battle, it's just an exploration. So you go around talking to people, you find all the little hints, and then you find the salt crystal in the little house. I think the order is you go and talk to the old man, and he says, get out of my house. And then you go to talk to Benedict, and he says something. Then you talk to Frederica, and you're like, hey, can you please convince the old man to get out of his house so I can search the carpet? And then you go and she goes in and she draws the old man out, and you look at the carpet and you find the salt crystal. And that's pretty much the solution to it. It's fairly straightforward. After that, you're thrown into Chapter 13. And Chapter 13 is an interesting one. Because at this point in the story, Roland wants to strike back and take back his castle. And this is the first time we see the game split into 3 paths, where you have to make one of 3 decisions. I know we've talked about sort of having a tri-split in Chapter 7, where it's kind of like not really obvious there's 3 different things you can do. Here, there's an obvious 3 different things you can do. The first option, which is the utility option that Benedict proposes, is you can blow up the dam. And this is actually a really, really fun chapter, where you get to go and investigate and you turn off a bunch of lights, and it's kind of like a sneak chapter, where you want to take over the watchtower in the dam town, it's the Tellior domain, basically, so you've already seen that map, but there's very few enemies on the map, and you can kind of sneak around, and as long as you kill that archer at the top of the watchtower or deal with him, there's actually a really funny way in New Game Plus to complete this map without doing any combat. It's hilarious. But this is a sneak chapter that can be completed fairly quickly without much combat, and Sicarus is the boss here because it's near the border of Esfrost. Or you can blow up the bridge with the Elfric that you got, and this map is brutal. I think it's the hardest of the Chapter 13 maps. It's literally the bridge from Chapter 6, but it's half of it, and on either, you've got Erica on one side and Thalas on the other side with their troops, and they're just kind of like squishing you in the middle. This one was really difficult. I did not have a fun time with this map. And the last option is, the Liberty Chapter 13 is the one where you sneak into the castle. The one I just talked about was the Morality one with Erica and Thalas on either side of the map. That's my bad. The Liberty one is sneaking into the castle and blowing up the boats so that they can't escape. Lots of explosions in this chapter. Either blow up a dam, you blow up the boats, or you blow up the bridge. Lots of bees, lots of explosions. Anyways, so in this map, you are destroying the boats, and this is also a battle with Erica and Thalas. And Thalas is on the boat, and then Erica on the second turn, I think, or third turn, ambushes your team from behind. It's not as brutal as the bridge map because you can kind of get set up for it, and you're starting on a side where you're not completely sandwiched in between the two. So this one, I think I would say is the middle difficulty option. The easiest one is the utility option to blow up the dam. The most difficult one is the morality option, which is blowing up the bridge, and sneaking in is sort of the midway option. Each of these leads into a Chapter 14. I'll talk about the utility Chapter 14 first because it is still the easiest option. You're going to fight Erica and Thalas no matter what. So after blowing up the dam, you come across the bridge and you run into Erica and Thalas, except this time you're at one side of the bridge and they're both on the other side of the bridge, and they're near the beginning of where their forces are. It's also a kill boss chapter, so if you kill both of them, the chapter ends. The first time I played this, I literally only killed Erica and Thalas on this map, and nobody else. So it's a really, really easy map. They just kind of rush at you, and you can kind of, surround them and kill them with follow-up attacks. Thalas goes down very quickly. He's not very defensive. Erica's a little bit tankier than him, but she's not that strong. So that's your Chapter 13. You can fight Sicarus and then Erica and Thalas. If you sneak into the chapter, you're fighting Erica and Thalas at the ship, which is the moderate difficulty, but I think this version of Chapter 14 is the most difficult one because you're fighting Avlora in the same castle map that you had chapter 5 in. So, the one with the fountain in the middle. If you remember the exploration map from chapter 2, it's basically that. And Avlora in chapter 14 is very, very strong. She has her ultimate move, Bloody Cross, I think it was here, which is the plus formation move that extends like 4 or 5 tiles out from each side and pushes you 3 tiles away. It is really, really strong, and she will use it. And she also has Risky Maneuver, which is her sacrificing only 5% of her HP to do a ton of damage to you. So Avlora here is really, really strong, especially if you're not on New Game Plus. I think this is the hardest version of the Chapter 14 maps. And then the last one, if you decided to blow up the bridge, is also Avlora, but it's a boat map. So if you're a Fire Emblem fan, I'm sorry for triggering your PTSD, but you're on one boat and she's on the other, and you have only one way to get on the other boat. And this is kind of weird because there's like flyers on the map that just kind of come over to your boat, so you can wait them out, kill the flyers, and then slowly go on to Avlora's boat. And she also does not have her ultimate move in this chapter, which I thought was kind of strange. Like, why would you not just make the most powerful version of Avlora in chapter 14 no matter what? It was kind of weird, but I felt like the boat map was a little bit underwhelming. There's not that many units on the map. You can take out the ones that are fairly easily, I guess. Oh, and I guess the one thing I should mention is that in chapter 13, Milo joins you, who is the dancer, and she's force deployed as a guest unit on chapter 13 and 14. She can level up, she gains EXP, she gains her skills, she's force deployed. You can't level up her weapon, and you can't level up her class. She's not in your encampment. She's joining as a guest character. She's temporary, but she's force deployed on these 2 chapters, and you can do whatever you want with her. You can direct her. She's like one of your units. You get 11 units on the map in these 2. And after that, regardless of the outcome, you basically take Glenbrook back, and you're thrown into chapter 15. And here you can see the branches of chapter 15. Chapter 15 is complicated, because in each branch of chapter 15, you get a different recruitable character. And I know you're thinking, damn, even the bottom choice that splits into 2? Yes, even the bottom choice that splits into 2. And I know you're thinking, damn, do I get to choose which one of the bottom choices that splits into 2 I get? And I say, no, you don't get to choose which one of the bottom splits you get to go down, because this one is dependent on whether or not you save the Roselle, and I'll explain why in a second. There's 3 choices in chapter 15. You can either go back to your castle, to Castle Wolfort, and see your dad, who is woken up from his coma, basically, and is feeling a lot better. You can stay in the capital and expose the royalists, who are sort of shady royal people who are stealing sort of the funding for the relief effort for Glenbrook and all that kind of stuff. Or, in chapter 15, you can choose to go back to the Roselle village, which is being ravaged by bandits. And I know you're sitting here thinking, well, hang on. Who cares about the Roselle village if you gave up the Roselle and there's no one there? Exactly. What psychopath would go down that path? Well, that's me. That's what I did. I gave up the Roselle, and then I decided, you know what? The lore sounds interesting of visiting the Roselle village, and there was a little note in the exploration of chapter 15 that said there's a certain bandit duo, a father-daughter duo, who is going there. So I was like, damn, that's the bandits from chapter 1, so I want to go see what's up. So I personally made the decision to go to the Roselle, and how this split works is you either save the Roselle and the Roselle are there, or you gave up the Roselle and the Roselle are not there. And so if the Roselle are not there, the village is deserted. The story is the same, it doesn't really change, but the character you get to recruit if the Roselle are not here is Travis, which is one of the bandit duos. If the Roselle are here, you fight Trish instead as the boss, and you recruit Trish. So that's the only difference. It's kind of really weird how they have the 2 bandits split up, but in hindsight, it does make sense. This village can be empty or it can be full. And so I think it was interesting that they decided to make either one of them recruitable, because eventually you will go back and try to revisit this path to get to see the other side of the story, basically. Now, if you go to the top option, which is to go visit Pops and see how he's doing, you are fighting, I forget who the boss is. I think it's the same one if you expose the royalists or go to the top. I'm not really sure. Patriot, that's the name. It's written here on my screen in front of me. I think you fight Patriot in both maps. The first one, Lord Simon is like this big greatsword wielder who's on the map, who dies on turn 1 unless you really protect him and do your turn 1 very well, so you gotta be careful. And you recruit Milo if you go down this path. The game makes it very obvious if you talk to everyone on the exploration chapter in chapter 15 at the beginning that Milo is interested in going back to Castle Wolfort. So if you go here, you recruit Milo, and you have to defend your dad, and it's kind of an interesting map in the hallway with kind of stuff coming down both stairs where you're getting ambushed. I don't think this is a defeat boss. I think this one is defeat all the enemies. The other two are defeat boss, so if you beat Travis in 15 or Trish in 15, that map ends. In the Royalists one, it's also defeat boss, it's just kill Patriot. So if you're looking for a speed clear, you do one of the bottom three here. You either do the Royalists one or you do the Roselle one. If you're looking for Milo, you pick this one. Now, Chapter 15 is important because this is a choice that matters. If you want the true ending, you need to go with Milo to Castle Wolford to visit your dad. I don't know why. It's not really clear why. I guess Milo is just, her as a person is a requirement for that true ending. And this is the last condition to get it. So, to recap everything we've known so far, Chapter 7, you either give up Roland or keep Roland but don't use the fire traps. Either one of those choices doesn't matter. In Chapter 9, you need to agree to smuggle the salt. In Chapter 10, you need to expose Roland's identity to Svarog. In Chapter 11, you need to save the Roselle or keep them in their village. And in Chapter 15, you need to go with Milo back to Castle Wolfort and see your father. Those are all the conditions for the true ending. Got it? Because the next few chapters, or the next one chapter, sucks. It comes back. Chapter 16 is my least favorite chapter in the entire game. It is the mines. They tried to be unique and make it a chapter where the enemy puts down bombs to collapse the mines and you need to defuse the bomb in time, but the map is just so massive that it is an absolute chore to traverse. And the enemy reinforcements show up in the corners of the map, the two far corners, and then one in the top where it's like close to where you start. So it's like, ugh. Just end this map already. I played through this 4 times, and I played through this once on very easy just to test how bad Chapter 16 is, even on the easiest difficulty. It wasn't much better, believe me. It still takes like a lot of time, even when you know what you're doing, and the map is just unnecessarily long, but it leads into Chapter 17. And you can already see the splits for Chapter 17. There's 4 of them, which is interesting because in your first playthrough, odds are you're probably not going to accidentally unlock all of the requirements that we had said for that 4th route that you see at the very bottom. It's just not going to happen. But the way the split goes is that it has this little thing in the middle. This little sort of sideways square, the rhombus or diamond or whatever you want to call it, the little conjunction thing that has the branches that come out of it. And if you're looking at this on an incomplete map, it's obvious that it goes up and to the right. And so you're sitting there like, huh, there's one that goes down and to the right? Like, what? So this is the point where I realized when I was looking at my map, I'm like, right, there's a 4th route. Cool. But this is basically where you choose your ending. You can see the path from here on does not have any splits, and I'm not really going to talk about them in much more detail because this video is already almost 40 minutes long, or at least the recording is. I don't know how it's going to look like after I'm done editing it. But basically, this is where you choose to side with Roland, Benedict, Frederica, or if you've done all the choices correctly from before, you get an option that says there must be another way, or there is another way. And that is your 4th route, which is the Serenoa route, where he does what he thinks is right. I'm not going to talk about any of the route splits at this point. I think from a story perspective, I would rather do a video diving into each one of them specifically in more details from like a story and character perspective and how much I like the ending. So for this video, we'll just keep it at this is a guide on how the route splits differ and how all the maps differ. And that's really that. Let me know what you guys think, what routes you've gone down, what routes you got forced down in the beginning, what routes you plan on going down later. That's all from me for now, and I will see you all in another video very, very soon. Peace.